Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. It's Katie here. Normally this is like the first time you've ever been to my channel, normally I tend to focus a lot on holistic wellness, fitness, spiritual talk, that kind of a thing. On Instagram, if you guys don't follow me on Instagram, you can follow me at Katie Maple, the same name is here on YouTube. I talk a lot about medical school and my experience being in a medical school that's not in the US. I went to a Caribbean medical school, and kind of how my experience may have been a little bit different from a typical US medical school, and then also how going to a Caribbean medical school is very similar to going to a school in the States. So I've gotten people shooting me DMs and messages and I just felt like it was an opportunity to create this video because a lot of them are the same. So I figured I would give you guys as much detailed information as I can. I've been compiling, questions here, and then go through them all together, so then if you guys have any further questions after the ones that I'm answering here, feel free to always hit me back up in Instagram or even in the comments. Like, just shoot me any kind of question that you have, anything that you might be curious about. I'd be happy to answer it to the best of my ability. So the first biggest question is going to medical school in the Caribbean a scam? And my experience has been no, it's not. I chose to go to a Caribbean medical school over a States medical school because my story is non-traditional. I mean, I did get my undergrad in a bachelor's of science in psychology, and I did minor in pre-medical sciences. But my major struggle has always been with test anxiety. And so for me, taking the MCAT, I took it and it wasn't able to portray to the best ability my actual intellectual status. And also I was going through a little bit of a quarter life crisis at the time. Like, I wasn't sure if medical school was my calling. So I ended up choosing to go to Caribbean school over school in the States. One, because I didn't want to have to retake the MCAT again, and at that time the school was allowing applicants to apply without an MCAT score. And also it was better for us tuition wise. The school that I go to costs only $70K for all 4 years of the entire medical school experience, whereas going to medical school in the States can sometimes cost on average $200,000. So those were kind of like some of the reasons why I chose to go to this school in the first place. And through my experience, I have never really felt like I was being scammed. I have always felt like, the school itself, it has a lot of hurdles and things that it has to jump through in general. Like, administratively, it probably wasn't the best school to deal with, but for my circumstances, for my story, for my case, it was the best option for me. And granted, I didn't take much time, to be honest, to compare the school that I went to in comparison to other Caribbean schools, or even in comparison to other United States medical schools. Like I said, it was just kind of a split choice decision, which again is a very non-traditional route. But it's just what's worked out for me. And another thing to add to that is that my mom is a physician, and so for me, I felt more reassured in my decision, especially after she checked out the school. She looked at the curriculum and she agreed that the curriculum and the way that they ran the school there is exactly the same as it was for her when she went to medical school in the early 90s. So with her reassurance and her blessing, I felt more secure myself to be able to make the decision to go to that school. So yeah, in a long way to answer that question, no, it's not a scam. So the second question is, what is life like living in the Caribbean to go to Caribbean medical school. And so this is the thing that's really funny, is that a lot of people that don't go to medical school in general. First of all, they just make assumptions that all that I did all day was lay out on the beach and, you know, drink rum punches and enjoy life. And even other people that go to, you know, school in the States or are some kind of different medical field, they always make some kind of assumption thinking that life was easier because I was in the Caribbean. And my experience was that it was a bit easier for me to experience the island and kind of play tourist in the beginning of my time, like in the first year of medical school, and I'll explain later like the format on like how school works and stuff like that. But it was easier for me to experience the island at that time, and then as we went farther along in the curriculum, it became harder and harder because I was needing to spend more and more time in the library or at home or what have you, studying and just doing practice questions over and over and over. So student life, it's what you make of it, it's what you decide to make of it. There are some students that I went to school with that choose to take it extremely seriously and they reaped the benefits, and then there are others who chose not to put that much effort and would have to deal with the consequences. So just like anything in life, it's whatever you choose to put into it is what you'll get out of it. And a lot of the professors will say the same thing. They explain like your grades in the class. One of my anatomy professors in the very beginning, he said, if you're getting, you know, mid B's in your courses as you're going along in medical school, then that's pretty indicative that you'll do very well in the step 1 exam without having to do much extra study time and like focus much more extra work on it. But if you're getting C's, you'll likely pass. It's just you're gonna need more effort to like bump up that score a little bit more and give you a cushion. Again, something I'll talk about again later. And then another thing is accreditation. So the particular school that I go to is pending accreditation, and that's because we have a sister campus on a different island that is pretty much stalling the accreditation process for our school. There are a number of schools throughout the Caribbean that are accredited. So again, if that's something that is important to you, you need to do your research and determine which ones are accredited and which ones are not. Some students were nervous about that when it comes to matching with residencies, but again, for me, that was never really a concern of mine, mostly because I already have networking and connections, again, because of my mom, but also I'm interested in family medicine, and that is a field that unfortunately doesn't have a very high population of students going into, and so if you are interested in family medicine and you're considering Caribbean medical schools, that would be a really great route for you because it would save you a lot of money, and also family medicine residencies are really in dire need of more students. So therefore, you're going to get accepted into a residency pretty much no matter what. I mean, if you're open and willing to going somewhere that's not in a major city, you're going to get into a residency, and that's not really something to be worrying too much about. The next question is about like, what is the curriculum structure? What do you expect? Like when you're in classes, what do you have to expect? Like what's a regular day look like? And to answer that question, so on average, classes are Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and that changes depending on the semester that you're in and depending on the classes that you're taking. I would say, like, on average, you actually are in class from probably 8 to 3, and there are some days, like lab days, for example, when you'll stay later until about 5 o'clock. And so then lectures themselves, each class is 2 hours worth of lecture, and then you get an hour-long break from 12 to 1. My normal plan was usually to study at the school from 8 to 3. I normally am not very good at listening to a didactic lecture and being able to take in material that way and then, you know, take notes and then go home and study it. First of all, there's so much information and not enough time that it doesn't make sense to do it the same way that you would do it back in college. At this point, it's all about understanding clinical cases and practicing the questions. And so this is something I would tell a lot of incoming students that were coming in, is they would say, you know, how do I study? And my best answer, and this is just what works for me, you're gonna have to find out what works for you, is to prioritize practice questions over anything, because you need to be able to understand the way in which they're going to ask the question so that you understand what material it is that you need to know about, if that makes sense, instead of doing it the other way around. Like a lot of students, myself included, would prioritize wanting to know the concepts and like understand the information before doing the questions, and that just ended up being a waste of time for me personally, because I would spend so much time focusing on understanding, or what I thought was understanding, concepts that were important, and then later on completely forgetting them or realizing it was unnecessary, and you know, you only needed to know a few bits of information for a specific vignette. And so that's the big thing, is that like you have to get in the practice of understanding how to do practice questions, and then on top of that, you need to pick the source of the practice questions based off of the professor. So what I mean by this is, if you have a professor that teaches pathology, for example, you need to understand, probably from the upperclassmen, the people that just took the class, or ask the professor themselves, what is their favorite, you know, study resource, whether it's something like BRS or Lippincotts or UWorld itself or First Aid, what have you. Find out what source it was that they liked people to study from, and some of the other students will say that their question style is very similar to question banks like that. So you need to tailor the question bank to the professor, if that makes sense. And then another thing that I wish I would have done if I were to go back in time is I would have downloaded UWorld, which is a question bank subscription, and I would have been doing those questions along with the practice questions tailored to a specific professor, because UWorld has been found to be the resource that is the most in line with the step 1 style questions, and so doing those will really get you in a good practice, so that by the end of it your 2 years are well spent and worthwhile, so that you don't really have to kind of feel like you have to start from scratch at least. Then to kind of piggyback off of that are the lectures focused on step 1 material. Now this depends school to school. My opinion is that the lectures that we had was not very well tailored to step 1 material as I'm learning it. And some people could disagree with me, but I just feel like it went into far too much detail. And you'll notice this too when you start doing practice questions yourself. You'll notice that in the question style, it'll be something along the lines of like a patient presenting with X, Y, and C symptoms. Maybe you get a histology slide or something, like they take a biopsy and then they look at it under a microscope, and then here's the picture. What's the diagnosis, right? So like that's an example of a style of question that you could see. And the whole point is to kind of find what is called the big hairy thing, or like the zebra within the question. And what that is it's like the key word or the key phrase that tells you, like is cluing you into what the answer should be. And so in that kind of a scenario, you need to understand what the key word is, and then what the pathology or what the disease is that it's associated with. Whereas I found, like with my lectures and with the examinations that I had with my lectures, that the information was so much more detailed on top of that. Or they would get super into histopathology, which means like they would ask for like what the exact cells would look like if you were to look at it under a microscope. You can get those kinds of questions in UWorld or like when you're studying for the step 1, but the prevalence of those questions appearing on that style of an exam is so low that to emphasize questions like that in a lecture exam seems to be too detailed, in my opinion, if you understand what I mean. So then the next question is like financial aid. Are you able to get, loans and things like that? My particular school, they did not offer FAFSA loans. You could get private loans, but again, this was part of my decision to go to the school, was that we were able to set up a financial payment plan with the school, and so we've been able to pay for it out of pocket, which I've been very grateful for, because it has allowed me to be able to afford my education and to be able to come out of it basically debt-free. I mean, my plan is to be working at my mom's clinic after I get my degree to pay back the tuition fees, but it's really nice to know that we're not going to have to owe a bank a substantial amount of money with a crazy amount of interest. And I already have student loans from undergrad, so it really is a blessing that we've been able to have this opportunity in particular. But for individuals that are in need of FAFSA or loans of any kind, you might want to look at a different school than the one I go to. If not, then this one might be a good call for you. Again, that's something that you need to decide for yourself. So then the next question is, what is the structure of medical school if you were to go to a Caribbean school? So my school, its headquarters is located in Chicago. I know that there are a couple of other Caribbean medical schools that have the same situation, where the headquarters is located in Chicago. And what would typically happen is they'd have you do the first 2 years of medical school, the basic sciences portion, in the Caribbean on the island. And then the second 2 years of medical school, the clinical rotations portion, is done in Chicago. So for me right now, I am in my step 1 dedicated study time, and I'm home with my family. And as soon as I pass the step, then that's when I moved to Chicago to complete my clinical rotations. And so then after clinical rotation in Chicago, then just like everybody else, you apply to match for residencies, and wherever you get in is wherever you go. And then another thing that people are asking is, is it bad for your record? Is it bad for your transcript if you have to retake a class? No, I actually had to retake a class myself. And what I've learned is that residencies that are looking for matching incoming residents, they are more interested in your step scores than your actual classes. Your classes can potentially play a role in whether or not you're matched at a residency, but that's further down the line in the list of things that they're checking off and looking at. Usually what I've been told is that they'll pay attention to the step 1 scores first, and then they'll look at where your school is, and then your resume basically, and then they'll look at your actual transcript if they need to, if they're comparing you pretty much to another potential candidate. And so yes, it is normal to retake a class. The rule at our school is that you have to pass it on your second go in order to be able to continue at the school. If you don't pass it on your second go, then you are dismissed from the school and from medical school in its entirety. And you could go into a different medical school if you wanted to, but that's just the rule at our school. Then the next question is, it's about the step 1 passing rate, and is it really, an accurate number? And something to keep in mind, in my opinion, is that the number of students that start medical school is significantly higher than the number of students that actually make it all the way through and end up taking their step exam. My class was 76 people in the very beginning, and I graduated with 19. And that is due to a number of reasons. Some people decided that medical school wasn't for them. Others decided that they wanted to transfer to a different medical school. What I appreciate about our school is that they require us to take the NBME shelf exam, the National Board of Medical Examiners shelf exam, before, and you have to pass it before you're eligible to take the step. And I appreciate that because I don't want to mess around with my step 1 score. I would much rather, know that I'm on the right track, and go in there confident than go in there freaking out that I could, not knowing my potential pretty much. And that's another thing to add on to, is that residencies will pay attention to the number of times you take your step. Usually it's better if you pass it on the first go, and if you get a high enough score on the first go. It's okay if you take it twice, but obviously they want to see significant improvement. And also if you do, adequately on the step 1, but they see that you get a much higher score on the step 2, then that's a really good indicator for residencies that you're the type of person that, despite hardship, you're going to stick through something. And that seems to be what a lot of residencies really care about, is they want to know, are you going to stick it through when things get tough, when things get hard? Are you the type of person that is going to just give up, or are you the type of person that will take a blow, take a fail, and turn it around and make something out of it? That is more important to, and this is information that comes from previous medical students, but also other individuals who work at residencies and who work in the admissions department. This is how I've gotten my information. And so this is what they've said is what they look for in candidates. And so, take that as you will. And then finally, things like living accommodations or their dormitories at my school. Again, that depends school to school. We did just recently have an apartment complex open up like across the street from the school, which is really awesome. But if you guys are curious to know about like living expenses and things like that, just shoot me a direct message on Instagram. Again, it's at Katie Maple. And so that is kind of like the general consensus of the types of questions that I've seen from a number of different medical students that are starting out. If you guys have questions beyond what I just talked about, feel free to shoot me a DM on Instagram again. I'm really happy to give you whatever kind of guidance I can, and just know that school is what you make of it, just like with anything else. And for me, this is why I talk about holistic wellness, holistic health, and spirituality on this channel, is because this is really what has kept me going with medical school in general. And that's another thing that I would add to it too, is have your why, have your why for wanting to go to medical school in general, but also make sure that medical school isn't your entire life, because for me, this channel and everything else that I do on social media is part of my why, and so that's why I put so much effort into it, is because it is an outlet for me outside of medical school, but it also gives me a sense of drive. It gives me some motivation to know that this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And so when I am doing my studies, when I am scheduling out, things like that, I know at the end of the day exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'm not feeling like I'm doing something for anybody else except for myself. So I hope that this video was insightful to you all. If you have questions, let me know in the comments below, or again, like I said, DM me on Instagram. I'm working to make videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Monday and Wednesday being pick a card readings, and then Fridays being a holistic wellness topic. So if you guys are interested in seeing more from me in regards to medical school, hit the like button. It encourages me to do more videos like this. And I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.